Hello, I'm going to describe some very important skills for interpreting the birth chart. This is especially important if you're interested in Western astrology. If you're interested in Vedic astrology, I think these skills are extremely important for Vedic astrology as well. They're not as fundamental and basic to Vedic astrology, but whether you do Western or Vedic astrology, these are things that you need to get very good at. And I'm making this as a fifth part to a four-part series that I made a year and a half ago. In the first four parts of this series, I described the basic language, what the planets, signs, houses, and aspects mean, how to get charts calculated, how to interpret the chart, different methods of astrological interpretation. And in this fifth part, I'm going to describe these basic skills, things that you need to get very good at to get fluent in the astrological language. There's also a full course in astrology with links to the 22 tutorial videos that gives you a complete education in astrology. And I'm going to add to the end of the fourth video a link to this video, which I think is a good fifth video in the series. So I've got links there if you want to go back to those, but you don't need to go back to those if you want to watch this video to go over these basic skills. Now these are skills that I'm going to compare to when you were a child and you learned multiplication table. So as adults, we all know that 7 times 4 equals 28. Well, there was a time where you had to memorize that. And just like memorizing multiplication tables, it takes time, it takes some effort to gain the mastery, to learn these basic things that you have to get fluent in to interpret charts easily. So you want to practice this until it becomes simple and natural for you. Let's go over these basic skills. Okay, I've got some questions for you to see if you've got this down, these very basic skills for interpreting charts. Here's the birth chart of actress Julia Roberts. Question, is there an aspect between Mars and Saturn? I'll give you about 5 seconds. Within 5 seconds, you should be able to find Mars and Saturn, and you should be able to see what the aspect is. Okay, did you get it? Here's Mars at 3 Capricorn. Here's Saturn at 7 Libra. We say 3 Capricorn means 3 degrees. More specifically, it's 3 degrees 45 minutes. So you need to get this skill of being aware that there are 30 degrees in a sign. Each degree is divided into 60 minutes. So Mars is at, you would say 3 Capricorn 45 is 3 3/4 of a degree into Capricorn. Saturn at 1 Aries, more specifically 1 Aries 09. What is the aspect? An experienced astrologer immediately knows that's a square aspect. How do they know? Because Capricorn and Aries are cardinal signs. So you get so accustomed to what are the cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs that you know when two planets are in cardinal signs or fixed signs or mutable signs, they're going to be in hard aspect to each other. So you got the idea? Let me say this again. To be fluent in the language of astrology, you need to know your cardinal, fixed, and mutable so that you know 3 Capricorn, 7 Aries square each other. What's the orb? 4 degrees, because 7 minus 3 is 4. Now, if you look at the exact minutes, in this case, you would notice it's actually closer to 3-degree orb because Saturn's in early 7 degrees, Mars is at late 3 degrees of Capricorn. But just round it off approximately, you can say Mars and Saturn are square with a 4-degree orb. This is something every astrologer can do, and they can do it quickly. Let's do another example. Is there an aspect between Mars and Jupiter? I'll count to 5. You should do this in 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're at a professional level of competency, you know that Mars and Jupiter are trine. Here's Jupiter at 1 Virgo 22. Here's Mars at 3 Capricorn 45. How do I know they're trine? They're both in Earth signs. 3 minus 1 is 2, so they're trine with a 2-degree orb. This is the kind of thing that professional astrologers can do. So if you want to get good at astrology, you've got to know your cardinal, fixed, mutable. When planets are both in cardinal signs, or both in fixed, or both in mutable, they're in hard aspect to each other. When they're in the same element, they're trine to each other. So you get very accustomed to knowing that Virgo and Capricorn are earth signs. And if you think, oh my God, who can memorize all that stuff? It's really not that difficult. Just again, just as when you were a kid, you learned how to multiply. It might have seemed very difficult at first. You get used to it. Let's do another example. Find Moon and Neptune. Are they aspected to each other? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did you find them? Did you see the aspect? Here's Moon at 24 Leo, Neptune at 23 Scorpio, square with a 1-degree orb. How do I know that? They're both fixed signs. Now this chart wheel actually has the aspect lines drawn in, but even without that, a professional astrologer can determine these things very quickly. Okay, so that's the idea. That's what astrologers can do. Okay, so here I just repeat what I have already described. Okay, now, here's an interesting one. Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter and Neptune. Now this one is more difficult. Let's see if you can figure this out. Jupiter and Neptune. It's not as obvious, but I want to introduce this idea. Okay, here's Jupiter at 1 Virgo, Neptune at 23 Scorpio. What is the aspect? This is an out of sign aspect. So Jupiter is at the beginning of Virgo, Neptune's towards the end of Scorpio. It's actually a square, and it's an exception to the rule where they're not both in mutable signs because it's out of sign. What you can think of this is imagine Neptune was at 1 Sagittarius. If Neptune was at 1 Sagittarius, it would be exactly square Jupiter. But it's back here in Scorpio, and so this is a square with a large orb, an 8-degree orb. And it's what we call an out of sign aspect. They're a little more difficult to see because they don't follow our rule where hard aspects would both be in cardinal, fixed, or mutable because it's out of sign. So you get the idea, one planet at the beginning of a sign, the other near the end of a sign. It's an out of sign aspect. So you need to be aware of that. These are the basic skills that every professional astrologer is very good at. And I'm going to show you a way to look at astrology charts to find out what the aspect is by looking at what we call an aspect grid. And you can practice until you're very good at it. This is the basic language of astrology. Okay, now I'm going to show you in the Kepler program, one of these, very popular astrology programs out there, how you can see these things. So in the Kepler program, you can just right-click on a chart wheel and change the wheel style. And this is a wheel style that has an aspect grid. Okay, so you pull up a wheel with an aspect grid, and then what you can do is you can practice. You can look at the planets. For example, the moon, Neptune. Here's the moon at 24 Leo, Neptune at 23 Scorpio. We said that they would be square to each other. And you go to the aspect grid, you go to moon, you go to Neptune, and there it is. I put a little purple square around this to draw our attention to it. And there they're square with a 1 degree, 27-minute orb. And S means separating. And this is the other thing that you get good at and you need to be able to figure out by looking at the chart. The moon is always faster than Neptune. So in this case, we don't need to have a table of the speed of the planets. We know that moon is always faster than Neptune. Moon never goes retrograde. Moon is at 24. Neptune is at 23. If we imagine the moon going around the zodiac in this direction counterclockwise, it's past the square to Neptune. It's left 23 on it and into 24, so it's separating. The square occurred earlier in time. So this is a separating square, and that's what the S means. So A means applying, S means separating. So this is something that you get very, very good at. Also, if you're testing yourself very, very carefully, this moon at 24 Leo 47 and Neptune at 23 Leo 21, if you subtract 24 minus 23 is 1 degree, 47 minus 21 is, what is that, 26 minutes. And I just want to point out that in the aspect grid, it says the orb is 1 degree 27 minutes instead of 1 degree 26 minutes. And that's because when you do it manually, when you calculate yourself, there's a rounding error, and it's off actually 1 minute compared to the more precise calculations that are done by the computer. So when you do it yourself, and if you end up 1 minute different, don't worry about it. That's a rounding error. So here's what I suggest. Call up a wheel style like this in your astrology software, and then look at the planets, and just look around. You'll notice, oh, Mars square Saturn. And then think to yourself, okay, it's a square. They're both in cardinal signs, has a 4-degree orb. And then you can look at the aspect grid, and there's the Mars square Saturn with it's actually a 3-degree 24-minute orb. Obviously, we can be a degree off because if you just look at the degrees and you're not looking at the minutes. But that's fine. At the beginning, just look at the degrees and get an idea of what's going on. And let me show you something else that's interesting. Let's look at the Jupiter-Neptune. Remember we said Jupiter and Neptune are square, an out-of-sign square with an 8-degree orb. That's what we mentioned on the previous slide. Let's look at Jupiter and Neptune in this grid. Here's Jupiter, and here's Neptune, and I put in a purple here to make it clear that this is the cell in this grid we want to look at. But it doesn't say square. It says BNOV. What does that mean? That means binovile. This aspect grid happens to include minor aspects like noviles. The binovile is 80 degrees, so the angular distance, it's showing the angular distance is 81 degrees 58 minutes, is a binovile with a 1 degree 58 minute orb. Because it's 81 degrees 58 minutes, it's 1 degree 58 minutes from the 80 degrees. So it doesn't list the square because this particular chart wheel with the settings that are being used has a smaller orb than the orb that's involved here, which is about 8 degrees. So the squares must be assigned an orb of less than 8 degrees, or else it would appear here as well. And this particular software, the Kepler and also the Sirius program, can show 2 aspects, because if you include minor aspects, such as a binovile, and you include squares with a large orb, like suppose you allowed a 10-degree orb, then Jupiter and Neptune would be both square and binovile. Okay, if you're getting a little bit lost at this point, listen to this video over and over again until it's clear, because these are the things that professional astrologers can do, and it's very simple for them and very easy. So don't be intimidated if you feel slightly overwhelmed. Just practice. It's very, very, very simple. All we're saying is that when the planets are certain angular distances apart, they're considered to be aspects. And if you start putting lots of aspects in here with large orbs, well, then some particular angles could be with an orb of 2 aspects. And that would be the case if we include binoviles and we include squares with a large orb of, say, 10 degrees. In this wheel, obviously a smaller orb was used because it does not show that they're square. Okay, so you got the idea. Now, as a professional astrologer, you should be able to find the basic aspects really simple, real simply, very easily. You cannot see things like binovials, the minor aspects, just by looking at the chart wheel. But most modern astrologers don't use minor aspects. They're just using the basic aspects, and those you should be able to see by looking at the chart wheel. Okay? You got it? Very simple. Just practice, practice, practice. Practice bringing up a wheel, looking at the planets, seeing if you can see planets aspecting each other. They'll be in a similar degree, or one will be at the end of a sign and the other at the beginning of another sign. But the degrees will be close to each other in your basic, what we call Ptolemaic aspects, the conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, and those 5 aspects, the Ptolemaic aspects, you should be able to find them by looking at the wheel, and you can confirm it by looking at the aspect grid. This is the basic skill that's worth practicing over and over and over again. Now, here's another basic thing that astrologers understand is waxing and waning, and you should be able to figure that out as well. Let's look at the Mars trine Jupiter. Here's Jupiter over here at 1 degree Virgo in the 2nd house. Here's Mars at 3 Capricorn in the 6th house. We said this is a trine, and if we look at Mars and Jupiter in the aspect grid, well, let me go back to the previous screen. Mars and Jupiter trine with a 2 degree 22-minute orb separating. It's separating, and the way we can confirm that it's separating is by looking at a table that has the speed of the planets. This is a table that has the declination, speed, and latitude, and the speed of Mars is 44 minutes. The speed of Jupiter is 9 minutes. At the time that Julia Roberts was born, Mars is moving 44 minutes a day, Jupiter is moving 9 minutes a day, so Mars is moving faster. Mars is at 3 degrees ahead of Jupiter, so you just visualize it. Just imagine these are 2 people walking on a track in a circle, or running around a track, or 2 cars going around a track. Mars is ahead of Jupiter, it's moving faster than Jupiter, and it's at 3 degrees, it's 2 degrees past the exact trine point, which would be at 1 Capricorn. So it's separating. And we also call it waxing because overall Mars is the faster planet than Jupiter, and it's on its way towards opposition. And Mars will trine Jupiter again when it's over here, returning back, and that's a waning trine. So Mars will make a waxing trine as it leaves Jupiter, and then make a waning trine as it returns on its way back to Jupiter. So there's a waxing trine and a waning trine. So there are 2 different concepts here, applying and separating, and also waxing and waning. So the applying and separating is the more common concept, and that's shown in the aspect grid. So again, you can pull up chart wheels like this. If you have one that shows the speed, you can look at the speed of the planets, look at where they are, see what the aspect is, and see if it's applying and separating. And again, just like when you learned multiplication tables, or you learned the alphabet when you were a kid, or you learn a foreign language and you memorize vocabulary, you just practice this. Learning musical scales in music, there's certain things in learning you just get used to. If you want to study biology, at some point you memorize the different organs and names of muscles, etc., etc. Excuse me. So here, what we're going to do to develop fluency, to develop that mastery of the astrological language, is just get familiar with this. And at first, like anything, it might seem difficult, but believe me, after a while, you get really good at it. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be a wizard to be able to get good at this. It's really quite simple, but practice. How do you practice? Pull up a wheel with a style like this, and then look at the planets, see if you can determine what's going on, and then look at the aspect grid. Here's the Sirius program, which is, as far as this goes, is the same as Kepler. I'm looking at an art wheel. If I right click and I go over here to standard wheels, and here, for example, just select A, and you get that kind of wheel style with the large aspect grid. That's all there is to it. Okay, so these are the skills to practice over and over and over again. And you know, for a lot of astrologers who consider themselves to be professionals, they're charging, this is really the fundamental thing that they can do. They understand the meanings of the planets, the signs, the houses, the aspects, as I taught in the first lessons, and then they just get very good at looking at the angular distance between planets and understanding what the angular distances are. Okay, and I don't think I emphasize this enough in the first 4 videos in this series on learning astrology, so I wanted to just emphasize this in a separate video, that once you can do this, you've gotten the fluency in that basic language of astrology. So here I say practice, 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 and I just mentioned exactly what I described, to go into a program and compare what you come up with by looking at the wheel with what it says in the aspect grid to make sure you have it. And the other thing to be good at, to get the basic language of astrology, is the rulerships. I mentioned this in the first lesson in the series of lessons, and I have a link to that at the beginning of this video. That Sun rules Leo, it's in detriment in Aquarius, its Sun is exalted in Aries, and fall in Libra. You can pause this video in the first video in this series, again, which I have a link to at the beginning of this video. I also mentioned a website page that you can go to that has a summary of this, or you can pause here and just make sure you memorize this. And here I've got the traditional rulers, where Mars in the traditional system also rules Scorpio. Anyway, I talk about this in more detail in video number 1 in this series, part 1, where some people now say that Pluto rules Scorpio. So there's a modern rulers. So you memorize this table, and so you can refer to it or use these ideas if you want to. It's another basic skill in astrology. And in Vedic astrology, you have the same rulerships. They don't use the idea of fall so much, but they also have additional ideas in Vedic astrology, something called Mula Trikona, some additional ideas. But the rulership, detriment, and exaltation is the same in Vedic astrology. Okay. So to summarize, here's some of the things you want to be able to do. Understand that there are 30 degrees in a sign, 60 minutes in each degree. Realize that if a planet's at 20 degrees of Taurus, it's 2/3 through the sign. Realize that 15 minutes is 1/4 through the degree, 30 minutes is halfway through a degree, 45 minutes is 3/4 through a degree. You just become very familiar with this and comfortable with this. You quickly notice if planets are in a similar degree, and then by looking at the signs that are involved, you can quickly tell what the aspect is. So for example, if the Sun is at 16 degrees of Gemini, Moon is at 17 degrees of Leo, professional astrologers quickly realize that's a sextile, because Gemini to Leo is 2 signs. You get used to this. You understand Gemini's the 3rd sign of the zodiac, Leo's the 5th. It becomes obvious to you that they're sextile. You get used to the zodiac signs and how far apart each sign is from each other. So that's the basic skill. And whether an aspect is applying or separating, whether an aspect is waxing or waning, these are things you should be able to do to be to have good skills, be at a professional level in your understanding of astrology. And the rulership, detriment, exaltation, fall, and you just practice until this is natural to you. This is the basic, fundamental, you might say, ABCs of the astrological language. Now, some astrologers, like myself, I use this system I call vibrational astrology. It goes into very different ideas. So this basic ABCs, we don't use it that much, but you still need it to get going. We even in vibrational astrology, when we're looking at what we call harmonic charts, we're using the basic aspects. We're looking at Ptolemaic aspects a lot, even in vibrational astrology. So really, these skills, realistically, no matter what system of astrology you go into, become very important. Just to have that basic language. So I wanted to make this video to underscore this point that you just practice this till it becomes natural, and that becomes almost a universal platform upon which you can build your understanding of anything else you want to study. Okay, so I wanted to make that clear. I don't think I made it completely clear in the first 4 videos. Okay, this is just to let you know about additional resources. Here's the link to the Cosmic Pattern software that makes the Kepler and the Sirius program, also the Pegasus program. Here's the link to the YouTube page of all the lessons. And here are some other websites. These are companies that I'm involved in. We have these additional websites. And also, if you go to the Cosmic Patterns website, which we have a link to up here, you click on articles and videos, and then click on videos. There's a nice index into the tutorial videos there as well. Okay, my friends, so that's it. I wanted to go over that. If you go through those first 4 lessons, and you do what I'm describing here in this 5th lesson, you will know the basic language of astrology. And if you go to that course, let me go back to this for one of these first, my second slide here. And if you go to this video here of the course with links to 20 videos, and you study that, you really have a very good level of skill and understanding in astrology. And we have 250 videos at this point, and we're making more all the time. So as of the time of making this video in August 2016, we've got 250. By next year, we'll be up to into the 300s. We keep making more and more of these videos to cover every area of astrology. Okay, thank you very much, my friends, for listening. God bless. Namaste.